Today we are extremely pleased to learn that HUD has provided us with an additional $21.6 million in community development block grant funding for disaster relief purposes. And this is just really going to be a tremendous buffer as we work together to build this quilt of resources to get at all of the needs of Vermonters. This is incredibly flexible money for affordable housing, for economic development, and for things like sewer and water in affected areas. It's a very substantial award. It's a big piece of the puzzle, and we've got a number of people who'd like to say a little bit about it. Mr. Speaker?
First of all, one of the things I would like to express my deep gratitude is to our federal delegation. The Senator Sanders, Representative Welch, and especially Senator Patrick Leahy were instrumental in making sure that we did receive these funds. And being from Windsor County, one of the hardest hit counties throughout the state, we are just so appreciative of the fact that the federal government, and especially our delegation, understands the pain that they have experienced throughout we've been experiencing throughout the state. And with this money, we will be able to rebuild not only our infrastructure, but we'll also be able to give comfort to those people who have lost not only their homes but their properties, and they're trying to find out where their life will go from here. And now, with these funds, we'll be able to give them new direction. And so we will go forward and continue our effort to rebuild the state of Vermont to where it was prior to Irene hitting. Mr. Speaker?
I'd like to echo Senator Campbell's thanks to the federal delegation and to the Congress as a whole that passed legislation that allowed us to have this additional money for community development block grants. These monies aren't going just to Vermont. They're going to other states throughout the country that have been ravaged by natural disasters. The importance of this money is the flexibility that it comes with. Because we can run it through the community development grant program, we are able to put it towards affordable housing, towards economic development and community infrastructure. And we can put it where it's needed most, using it flexibly so that we can rebuild communities stronger than they were before Tropical Storm Irene. So it's great news. It helps us to address the concerns of our local communities, and I think that we should be proud of our delegation, but proud of the support of our federal government in recognizing in our time of need that they have an obligation and a responsibility to help all of the citizens of the state of Vermont and in the country. Thanks.
The federal delegation played an absolutely critical role in this, as they have throughout all of this process. Senator Leahy's leadership, Senator Sanders' full commitment, and the work that Representative Welch did in the House have made a tremendous difference on this and every other piece of federal work. The governor has been in touch with the Secretary of HUD and the Obama administration directly, and that's been incredibly important. They've expressed their deep understanding. But first, we'd like to ask the representatives of the federal delegation to speak on behalf of their folks. Ted.
Thanks, Lawrence. Ted Brady from Senator Leahy's office, and today's announcement, the $21.6 million of community development block grant money from Housing and Urban Development, really marks something that started the day after Irene struck Vermont, when Vermonters were in their muck boots digging out their homes from floodwaters and mud. Senator Leahy, Senator Sanders, and Congressman Welch were down in D.C. in their muck boots, getting through what at the time was really an impossible mess in D.C. A budget battle was going on where people were saying no to any disaster funding. And then in addition to that, they said if we put disaster funding in, we're going to make you offset it. First time in the history of Congress that's ever happened. And our delegation went down there, made sure that the federal spending bill for this year included disaster money. We had to fight off a filibuster. We did that by one vote. We had to fight off calls for less money. We did that, got up to $400 million for community development block grant money in the Housing and Urban Development budget. And then Congressman Welch had to go through and explain to leadership in the House, who said no to any disaster money, created a coalition, had to change things, change a lot of minds in D.C. So it was a great day. In addition, Governor Shumlin, Secretary Miller made phone calls directly to the highest levels at HUD and explained this condition in Vermont. We're one of 8 states in the country receiving money out of the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Set-Aside. The money will, as Senator Leahy says, it's going to give Vermonters the ability to make made-in-Vermont solutions to recover from Irene. Not something that the federal government tells us they have to do, but really a made-in-Vermont solution that will allow Vermonters to rebuild their communities the best way they find necessary. So thank you to the state of Vermont, to the governor's leadership, really, and to the legislature here at the state for really explaining the situation to HUD and making the work we did in D.C., that our bosses, Senator Leahy, Senator Sanders, and Congressman Welch did in D.C., pay off with today's announcement. Thanks, Alex.
I'm going to use a cheat sheet. Unlike Ted, can't keep all that in my mind, although you've said pretty much everything I think both Susan and I are going to say. Like Senator Leahy, Senator Sanders fought hard to include these funds in the federal budget. And Bernie, Senator Leahy, and Representative Welch all spoke directly with HUD Secretary Donovan to impress upon him Vermont's rural character in small size. That really makes us different than the other, or 6 of the other 7 states that received this money. And we're thrilled that that message got through. And as you've heard from the folks in the state level, this is enormously flexible money. It's going to help with the long-term recovery. I won't get into what the money can be used for. But I will say that Vermont, as you all know, was facing a shortage of affordable housing before Irene hit. We, like the rest of this country, are facing the effects of a prolonged economic recession. Irene only made those challenges worse. So this announcement could not have come at a better time. And while we're thrilled with the announcement, and we sincerely thank HUD Secretary Donovan, his representatives here in Vermont, I think if Senator Sanders were here today, he would say, we really should expect this of Washington. After all, when one state experiences a disaster of this scale, when Joplin, Missouri gets hit by a tornado, or the historic floods in the upper Midwest, we rally together as a nation to help that state, just as Vermonters have rallied to help each other. And as Ted mentioned, unfortunately in Washington, there were some that wanted to use disaster funding as just another excuse for a budget debate. Senator Sanders, Senator Leahy, and Representative Welch stood up and said no. No to the idea that disaster recovery funds are predicated on first cutting heating assistance for struggling families, on cutting Pell Grants and food stamps, assistance to seniors, and much, much more. We're very glad that our views prevailed. We're pleased to be here. We're thrilled with this announcement, and we look forward to working with Governor Shumlin and his staff, his team, to make sure that Vermont has all the federal resources it needs to fully recover from Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Irene.
Hi there. Thank you. I am Susan Elliott on behalf of Congressman Peter Welch, and he would say, if he were here today, that he was also amazed by the devastation of Tropical Storm Irene on the last day in August there, and went back to Washington and worked to put together a bipartisan coalition, and with the senator's help, got the $21.6 million to come to Vermont. The nice part about CDBG is it is flexible federal funding, so it allows the state and communities to decide what their priorities are and to go forward. And with the shortage already of affordable housing, this is especially helpful because without a safe, affordable place to call home, nothing else matters. So we're so grateful for the leadership of Governor Shumlin and his team, Commissioner Miller and Deputy Commissioner Haller, and also to Mike McNamara at HUD for making this federal funds come to Vermont for this. So thank you so much.
So this really did start just days after the event. The CD team and Jen Haller were already planning a meeting on some issues with Assistant Secretary Mercedes Marquez, who is down in Manchester, New Hampshire. and Mike McNamara, our HUD representative, made it possible for us to spend some quality time with her. And the advice that we got over the time that she spent with us helped our working relationship with FEMA and with HUD and how these things work together in a way that I can't begin to describe. It just made the whole thing go so much more smoothly. This is all made up at the time. Mike McNamara is here from HUD, and I want to express my appreciation to you and to Mercedes and to Secretary Donovan, because it's just been fantastic.
This is a pretty extraordinary announcement. As a lot of you know, this year HUD's taken probably the biggest hits in its budget in the entire federal government, and to be able to bring a large amount of money like this to Vermont is extraordinary. I want to thank two groups of people, this group over here and our senators and congressmen. I'm amazed at how much they were able to get the message across. This was not an easy conversation in Washington, and they really made it happen, not just for Vermont, but for all the other states that got the money. Vermont's delegation was a key to that. The other person and group I want to thank is Governor Shumlin, because we at HUD are very impressed with the team that he's assembled, Lawrence, Jen, Noel, the entire team. I see Josh and Ann over there as well. We are confident that with this group that this money will be well spent and will never have any congressman of any kind questioning how the money got spent in Vermont, because everybody here does it right, and that's been the history in Vermont. And so this money is coming, and we know it's going to go to good use. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Sue Minter, the very newly appointed Irene Recovery Officer. And I am so pleased to be here on behalf of Governor Shumlin to speak his words that I've heard him say so many times. We have the greatest congressional delegation in America. And when I worked for the Transportation Agency, figuring out how we would ever manage to pay for the damage, the extreme damage on our roads and rails, they fought for us and they brought for us. They lifted the cap. They enabled us to not be overwhelmed by this damage. We are embarking in recovery on a community partnership. We're going from community to community. And we are seeing that, as the governor loves to say, all recovery is local. We are learning that we have done a remarkable job throughout the state in our immediate response. These critical dollars are really for long-term recovery. The stories we're hearing out throughout the state are not only about getting back on our feet quickly, but looking to the long term of how are we going to rebuild communities, some of which were very devastated, helping individual businesses, addressing infrastructure needs, looking at community development holistically. That is precisely what these needed dollars can be built towards. And it is really not, it's become very obvious to me in just my second week on this job how essential it is to have the advocates we have at the federal level and now at the state level. So glad to be back with the legislature back in session, to be carrying the torch forward, addressing the challenging legal issues that Irene has brought to us, and working together in that kind of spirit of partnership where state agencies and federal agencies, where our congressmen and our legislators come together to support Vermonters at this incredible time of need. We can do it together. We are Vermont strong, and we thank everyone for these needed dollars. Communities will be coming up with projects. We will have a public process on how to best prioritize these emergency funds. We know they're needed, and we will do everything we can to ensure they are made to the best, put to the best use as expected of us and as known by our record here in Vermont. Thank you very much.
So one final closing piece. This does help assure that we can help all towns who wish to pursue hazard mitigation grant applications, that the 25% match will be available to them to help fulfill those projects without additional costs to the towns. We'll be working closely with VEM on that process.